Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. And boy, have we got a good one for you today. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. We've got Alex on deck. That's right, my old buddy, my old pal is going to be on the show today, and you're going to hear, a poet-philosopher, a fearless personality, a musician, an athlete, a street fighter back in the day, at least that's what we thought we were, financial services, white-collar worker, and now just early retiree, raising a set of grandsons. But before we get to Alex, I want to read to you a little something that I saw. It's caught my eye in Rolling Stone about a musician that both Alex and I like, and you probably do too. I mean, Alex and I just love this guy, Neil Young. Listen to this. The byline on this article is Aaron Manning, and it's Dateline, Hartford, Connecticut. Neil Young has never held his tongue when it comes to railing against factory farms and the corporate food industry, and at the 33rd Farm Aid on Saturday in Hartford, Connecticut, Young's impassioned appeals toward activism and policy change, interlaced with his nonchalant stage style and relentless sense of humor, made him a highlight of the festival. Between easy old familiars like Field of Opportunity and Heart of Gold, Young sandwiched his repeated question, "What are you going to do when you see a farmer's market?" with colorful follow-ups like, "Go in and buy something and stay away from those dollar stores." Protest songs, Ohio and Children of Destiny, were powerfully juxtaposed with set closer Love and Only Love, whose final words, "Spirit, come back to me, give me strength and set me free," were sung in unison by all the band members and unfurled into the most compelling instrumental breakdown and performance of the festival. But the high point was a marvelous performance of Powderfinger, with Lucas and Micah Nelson's promise of the real backing him up. That's Willie's kids. Young blasted off a firecracker of a guitar solo that musically framed the song's brilliant final phrase. Quote, "When you see a farmer's market, just stop in and go in and get to know them and buy something. Buy something good. Don't buy the shit you get at Safeway. Buy something that's really safe. All that crap you get in these big stores, it's not good. It's got a lot of chemicals in it, and it kills the earth," Young elaborated. His message, while humorous, was also dire, a call for action that has become customary for the food-focused Farm Aid, which this year stressed a far more urgent situation. Young, a Canadian citizen who cannot vote in U.S. elections, also took aim at President Trump in a pre-show press conference. "Whoever you vote for, I respect you for voting. I'm a Canadian. I can't vote," he said. "I've been called a lot of things by this dickhead in the White House, but I am a Canadian and I love America. There's nothing here that needs to be made great again." End quote. Well, that's Neil Young, God love him, speaking his mind in Hartford, Connecticut at Farm Aid. We're going to devote the entire show today to our special guest, and he has no trouble speaking his mind. Like I mentioned at the onset, lifelong friend of mine. I'd like to tell this story just real briefly, an example of what this guy's like. We're 16, 17 years old riding around in the back of a friend's car, and we got a case of beer in the back seat, and we're scooping the loop downtown, and the guy behind the wheel decides to get aggressive with somebody that cut him off, and we're going too fast, and we run a light or something like that. The entire inside of the car explodes with this light. It's rollers. It's cops. We're getting pulled over, and the cops come up to the windows and they flash the lights in, and Alex is sitting next to me, and the cop looks and says, "What's that?" And Alex says, "Well, that's an empty six-pack. Out of the car, boys." And we had stuck beer bottles under the seats and in our pockets. We'd hit them every place possible, but that one empty six-pack container, and we're all going to jail. And Alex stood out there in the street at 17 years old and talked to this cop and explained to him how I was late to the party, how my parents were a little more strict than theirs, that's an understatement, and how my old man would kill me if I got caught, and I really wasn't guilty like the others were, which is ridiculous. I was in the car. I mean, I was as guilty as anybody else. And he talked that cop out of taking me to jail. They let me loose. I put my thumb out and hitchhiked home, and those guys went to jail. And this is the kind of guy that this friend of mine, Steve Alexander, is. And I've got a literally probably dozens of those kind of stories. But that's just one when we were of a very early age. But it set the stage for what has been a lifelong friendship for George A. and Alex. So he's on deck, and actually this podcast was recorded out on the deck. So let's get out there and talk to my buddy Steve. Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome back to another podcast by George. We're here out on the deck today, outside doing a podcast, because it is a beautiful day in the great Midwest, and this is gonna be fun for me. We're interviewing an old friend of mine, and I'm talking about old, going back to kindergarten. Steve Alexander, I'll call him Alex, a great buddy of mine. He and I have many years and much in common, and started out as kids in a small town. I grew up on a farm. He grew up in the town, actually, and met there in grade school. And I don't know, I've tried to describe this guy to a lot of people, and the way that I always get to it actually is the guy is fearless. I've played sports with him. I've fought in the street with him. I've been with him now for the better part of my life, and has no fear. And as we talk here today, you'll see that it's kind of led to some of our life's adventures and some of the pathways that we've gone down. And how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, George.
Yeah. So tell us, take us back there. How do you recall, the old days?
Well, obviously remember you from my very first school experience, and George was what we would have referred to back in those days as the class clown. He was the guy that always kept things interesting. You wanted to have George in your class because it was going to be a lot more fun than not having him there. But as we grew up, of course, we had one thing in common. The first thing in common was baseball, and we both played ball together against each other in little leagues. We were on a couple of conference championship baseball teams, which I'm still very proud of, and I'm sure you are as well. And as we became older, I think that we understood we actually had more in common than just those things, that we both shared a certain broad understanding of the world. We maybe looked at it through different eyes than other people, but we were progressive thinkers, and we were going to get out there and we were going to mix it up. We weren't going to let anything deter us from doing what we want to do, and I think that's really we are both still at this day, and I think that has made my life a good one and yours as well. We are happy, optimistic people. We're looking forward to the next day.
We've reached obsolescence, but as we reached adolescence, I described it as being a redneck hippie. Would you agree with that analogy? Does that seem accurate to you? What's that mean?
Well, I remember you coming up with that label when we were in high school, and I think that is accurate. And what that means to me is that we are redneck from the perspective that we are old school. We don't believe in making excuses. We don't believe in taking the easy way out. If it comes to a fight, we're there. That's who we are. But we also believe that there's more to life than that, and that you have to have a higher understanding if you're really going to fulfill your potential. Every day should be a challenge. You should be able to accept change in this world and anticipate it. That's where the hippiness comes in, I guess. I don't know if I've ever thought of hippies as being progressive, but I think that's accurate enough.
Yeah, and sports, of course, had a lot to do with our formation. I know it was a big part of your life and still is. What sports mean to you?
Well, sports are the greatest interpretation of life for me. Sports and music have basically been my whole life, and I love the challenge of sports. I love the teamwork in sports. I love the reality that the person that works the hardest and the person that fights the hardest is the person that wins. The person that wants to make their teammate better is going to have a greater chance of success than that person that doesn't. And you have to learn how to deal with all sorts of different people, not only those of like minds.
So sports, a big part of our lives back then, still is for you. You're coaching kids,
Well, coaching some, not a lot. I'm raising some grandkids. I got a 9 and 11-year-old boy at my house that are a great joy. They're both athletes. I think they will continue to progress in their athletics. I don't do much of my own competing anymore because I'm too old. My knees started to tell me it was time. I was lucky I didn't have any terrible injuries, but I competed until I was 40 and then continued to play ball till I was 50, and I gave up jogging when I was 60. So you have to face reality, but I'm still very involved in sports and believe in them.
I hear that. You know, the subtitle for the program is News, Blues, and Interviews, and it's amazing to me, and probably because of my interest, but how many people I know that are involved in music, and you were very heavily involved in music at one time. You fronted a band, back in the 80s and 90s. Tell us about that.
Well, the first serious band I was in was a band called Tangent. And this band was formed by an old close friend of mine who actually was my neighbor. He was a very gifted guitar player. His family were a bunch of gifted musicians. And he wanted to have his own rock and roll band. And I was in the military at the time. I was learning to play the guitar. At that time, I'd played other instruments. But that's really where I really made a big, strong, heavy investment in music. And I played with that band for six and a half years, I think, from like January of 79 until June of 85. Then decided I had to walk away from that. It was going in a different direction than I was. Continued to play and write music and things, and in 1990 kind of broke out on my own and had a bunch of creativity that went through me, and I wrote a bunch of music at that time and got another band together. That guitar player buddy, he was part of it, and recorded an album called Solo, which was really a commentary where I was my whole life, because I was going through a divorce and basically seeing how the world itself can chew you up and spit you out unless you have the gumption to make your own decisions and go your own way. I mean, that's really what I was trying to address through that piece of music, that, sometimes it's, it might be your job, it might be your spouse, it might be your family, it might be the country you're in. There are all sorts of things that are going to challenge you, and you better be able to figure out when it's time for you to go the other way, when it's time for you to take the road less traveled.
I happen to have a copy of that CD, Solo, and I'm going to play a little bit of it. And people, you got to realize now we're going back to what, the early 90s? Was this recorded?
Yeah, I finished it in 93.
Yeah, and
so it was
self-produced.
Yes.
Yeah. And what do you want to play? What song do you think what's probably traveled best through the years here, do you think?
Well, the song I think that people have remarked to me about is a sound called Round and Round. And I think it does, I think it's one of these songs that people can relate to. It certainly wasn't a laborious writing process. It was more just a jam that turned into a song. Basically just a walk down of chords that circle around and circle around. So there's not a lot of advanced structure to the song, but I think that's one that people like the most.
All right, let's give that a spin. Check it out.
I wonder where it's gonna lead. seen so damn much, but there's still so much that I've got to see. So I live my life without asking questions. I make the best out of the bad with blind faith. But if you live your life, I'm saying really live your life, well, together we'll both slip away and go round and 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 round. You know we gotta go round and 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 round.
So that's back from, did you say 93, 92?
Yeah, it was 93 when I actually got the CDs pressed. So it was about 90 when I started writing most of his music. And that was really, that was the kind of a watershed moment in my life. And it's interesting now, becoming an older guy, to realize that, that was the watershed moment. And I've been on that road less traveled for a long time, and there's not a lot of other people on the same road, but
yeah.
That's okay. I know you are. I don't need a lot of friends. I just need the best.
It's all about quality.
That's right.
It's not quantity.
That's right.
So you had to set it down after that. You did the CD, and then you just, you're touring, doing bars, doing the typical thing, and you just decided no mas.
Well, my band fell apart, I think. Possibly I think that some of the members of the band thought that we were going to become rich and famous, and when that didn't happen, I think then the illusion was broken with them. So I actually went on to another band, and I played with that band for a couple of years, and I didn't have to be everything in that band.
That was more blues based, wasn't it? I remember.
Yeah, it was blues based. The name of the band was Code Blue, and we did some gigs around town and things. It was interesting. There was some talented people in there. All bands are interesting. When you look back on them, you can maybe understand things that could make it easier, make it better. But there's a hard reality about being in the music business. That is, most people are not going to be successful to the level they want to. It's feast or famine, and most of us are going to experience the famine. And as long as that is what is making you motivated and you're getting some sort of reward for what you're doing, that's fine. But I had 2 children to raise, and I made a basic conscious decision that I was going to have to make my career my priority, and that's what I did, and it was the right decision.
Interesting. When you look at people, and I like to describe it as each personality, each individual is kind of like a Rubik's Cube. We've got all of these different angles and looks just depending on what the particular twist is at the time. And here you are, this great musician, a sports person, a guy kind of on the left end of the political spectrum. Yet, what I think of your family, and we're talking about a great military tradition here, a military history in your family. Tell us about the Alexander family and their service.
Well, Dad fought in World War II. I believe his father fought in World War I. He died when I was 4 years old. I don't know a lot about Grandpa Alexander, but he was a great man. My dad was a great man. 3 brothers and I were all military veterans. My older brothers were old enough to fight in Vietnam. They both did year tours in Vietnam. Myself and my younger brother, we were lucky. We had peacetime duty. But, yeah, we're very proud of our military tradition. But, you know, I'm not a shoot first and ask questions later type of guy, and I just think that's the wrong way to go about things. There's no political discourse about the military involvement for our country, and it's almost like if you have the audacity to think there's something other than bomb them, there's something wrong with you. Well, that's, to me, maybe that's where the hippie, I mean, certainly the progressive thinking comes in. You have to be able to discern what makes sense and what doesn't, and not every skirmish needs to turn into a military type of confrontation, but that seems to be where we're at.
Yeah. And the veterans, and rightfully so in a lot of respects, kind of have the ear of the nation right now. People are very attuned to the needs and wants and desires and influences of the veterans. Are all four brothers feel that way? Do they kind of in line with you on that?
Two of my brothers are. My oldest brother, I'm not going to say he's not in line. My oldest brother's a Trump supporter and probably had the most challenging duty of any of us, my dad included. And I think that he's a good man. He's entitled to his opinion. But the others, and my dad would be the same way if he's still alive. I mean, you'd have to be able to understand that just showing your military might is not going to solve all these problems. I mean, we want to be the strongest military in the world. It's necessary that we are that. But we need to be a just country. We don't need to be a country that just attacks. That's my take on it, and I really don't think you're doing your military members a service by just always thinking that there has to be a bellicose foreign policy that's pursued. Sometimes, you bet, hey, when you got to do it, you got to do it. But as we've seen with, not only Korea, but Vietnam and on, it's like very few times are these civil war type of conflicts you're getting into going to be easily resolved. It's just not the case.
Yeah. So that's the military service, and I don't know. I can't get away from the music. I'm now remembering. I was at an event not too long ago, and you at this event that we were at, and it goes back to this part of being fearless that we're talking about. The guy jumps up on stage. He hasn't been with a band for a couple of decades now, and got up and just killed it. And I've got this recording. I want to play a little bit of it. But I told somebody afterwards. I said, if this were the Super Bowl instead of a bar, I mean, it was a small venue, but still, Alex could get up there and do that and not have a care in the world at the Super Bowl in front of 100,000 people. You have this fearless thing. There's no nervousness. There's no fear, particularly when it comes to live performance and singing. That it's just not a part of you. Well, why is that? What is that?
Well, it's just the reality that what could be more fun to do. I mean, it's been something I've worked on my whole life, but when I was in my career, I worked in financial services for years, and many times that means you had to make a presentation. Maybe it was just a few people, maybe it was to a classroom full of people, who knows. But just as when I got into performing, the same thing really applies, and that is, what could be more fun to do today? I mean, seriously, if you look at it the right way, just like you're saying, what could be more fun than getting up in front of people in the Super Bowl and doing your thing?
Some people would have a heart attack. The biggest fear in the world for some people is public speaking, getting up on a stage, getting behind a microphone. Scares them to death. But
if you study it, though, if you apply yourself, and you've learned these things just like I have, and I don't know if they're totally accurate, but what do they say, that 90% of your nerves never show? I mean, I think that's very true. When you're up there, of course you're exposed. You have to embrace the fact that you're on display. But what you also have to carry with you is the confidence to know that most of those people are shocked that you can even do it. They're not really as critical as you may think. I mean, I figured that out a long time ago, that if you get up in front of people and sing, there may be some people that don't like you. There may be some people that don't think you have a good voice. but everybody's going to be impressed by the fact that you did it. And I think that is still true today. Lord, I loved getting up there and doing that, George. You know, it's something that I made a conscious decision not to pursue some years ago. But like I told you then, show me the stage, man. I'm ready to go.
And I happened to grab a little live recording of it. Let's listen to this. This is the great Doors song, Roadhouse. And this is Alex on vocals. Check this out.
Keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel. Keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel. We're going to the road as we're going to have a good time. Down at the road, they got some bungalow. I'm saying down at the road, as they got some bungalow. Well, they are there for the people who want to go down slow. Let it roll, baby, roll. Let it roll, baby, roll. Let it roll, baby, roll. Let it roll all night. Roll, through my soul. Roll, that's in my soul. We're going to take it down to the golden, to the rainbow out. I'm going to take it down and I'm going to say, alright. It's alright. Well, ask your lady. Ask your lady. Give up your vows. Give up your vows. Save our city. Save our city. All right.
The great Jim Morrison and the Doors tune Roadhouse, and that's Steve Alexander on vocals for that song. Well, before we wrap up here, I want to get to another big part of this Rubik's Cube with your persona that's interesting, all these different angles. Horse racing. You happen to be the best handicapper that I know for horse. How did you get involved in horse racing and handicapping?
Well, I always was attracted to horse racing, but I didn't have any money. And, you know, at first it was just $2 to show on the horse I thought was prettiest or whatever. I liked the name. But as I got into it more, met some different people, I started to realize, you know, there really is something to this. Most people believe that, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people believe that somehow it's determined before the race starts who's going to win the race, or all of these things are fixed, or this or that or the other thing. But no, the greater reality is this is a professional sport, and those participants that are the best trained, you know, that are the best mindset, they are the ones that are going to perform better. And through different information you're given, you can tell if they've been competing against more difficult other equine athletes or less difficult equine athletes. There's a million different things you can learn. There's no end to it. There's no end to the resources. And the tough thing is you got to pay your tuition just like you're going to college. When you're putting down bets, it doesn't matter if it's a $2 bet or a $100 bet, you're getting that little piece of paper back that's like a 3-inch square. That's what that money just bought. And you better be okay with that, because the chances that it's going to turn into something more than what you bought are not very good at first. Over a period of time, you know, you get better.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to lead anybody to believe that I will always be profitable. Sometimes I am, usually I'm not.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I love the spectacle of it and the look of it. The horses, the premier animal athletes that they are. It's just an enjoyable experience. It's usually in the evening. The weather's summertime. It's great to be outdoors. You're good at it. I'm not so good at it. What advice would you have for a guy like me or somebody that's just listening to the show that's not a regular at the track and they want to go and they want to at least not lose their shirt, make some money, have some fun? What would your advice be from a handicapping perspective?
Well, there's a number of different things you can do. Maybe the easiest thing to do is just buy a program, have somebody explain to you what the speed figures are, find the horse with the high speed figure, and put a couple dollars to
the speed
win,
rating.
place, or show. Yeah,
I look at that. Yeah,
and that doesn't, all these other variables come into play, which may make that more legitimate or less legitimate than you think it is. But it's like anything else. If you can find the fastest horse on the page, that's your best chance to make money. I
mean, I don't have a very scientific way of looking at it. I'll look at what the experts say. I'll look at the odds that they put on the horses that they pick, and then I'll look at the moment track odds. And if I find something that, like they call it an overlay, if there's something happening where the people at the track are not betting the same way that the experts picked, then I think maybe that's a horse worthy of putting some money on, because I've got a little bit of a head start from an odds perspective. I mean, that's not very scientific, but that's the method that I use.
That's more scientific than most people, but the thing to remember about the morning line, that is not who the odds maker thinks is going to be the best horse. That's who the odds maker thinks the people are going to bet on. And that's what is very hard. It's taken me years and years to wrap my arms around that. So what they're trying to tell you is what they think the odds of this horse are going to be. They're not necessarily going to bet that horse. And that's, horse racing is all about odds. Do not bet short-priced horses, because you'll never make any money in the long run. Now, for a lot of people, I think it's just being able to cash a ticket that day, and that's fine. Bet favorites in every race, and based on the...
and go home a winner.
Well...
hopefully.
Well, you should cash some tickets.
Yeah. Well, you're a winner. I mean, you feel like you are.
Well,
I mean...
There you go. It's just like somebody walks into a casino and loses $100 on slots, they'll tell you they're a winner because they actually hit a couple that paid them a little bit of money.
Maybe we'll do a future show on horse racing, because it is a science. It's highly statistical. There's a lot to it. But when you look at these horses, there's, 3 or 4 different things that you can bet. You can bet the jockey. You can bet the trainer. You can bet the owner. You can bet the sire. What element do you weight the heaviest? What or the past most recent start of the horse?
Well, there's no doubt playing trainers and jockeys. I mean, the better way to put it is you need to really understand that the trainers and jockeys you cannot ignore. That's the big thing. And if you're in a race where there's just like one combination of jockey trainers that have a high winning percentage together and that looks like they're on the best horse, that's the horse you want to pick. Generally, it's not that simple. When you get into things like bloodlines, well, then it really depends on the type of race you're looking at. If you're looking at a maiden race, that's when that matters. These horses don't have any track record. Well, once you have a horse...
What's a maiden race? A lot of people wouldn't know.
A maiden race. I'm sorry. A maiden race means that a horse has not won a race.
No.
So when they break their maiden, that may sound like a female or filly term, but it applies to the boys too. Every horse is a maiden until they win a race. So that's when you look at the bloodlines. That's when you're looking for the best bloodlines, the most predominant sires. It's going to be easier to follow that than it is the dams. But as you get more of a track record, well, it doesn't really matter what the lineage is. There are countless stories out there of horses that have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars that never could run, and other horses that maybe somebody bought and sell for $10,000 and wins $1 million. Those are both extreme instances, but it's like everything in life. We've both been athletes all our lives, and we can remember people that were great athletes when we were young and didn't have it. They may not want to compete. You never know what you're dealing with. Might get injured. Injuries are big in horse racing. I mean, there's just a million things that can can apply. That's where, if you really want to get into it, man, then it's like you're talking about racing conditions.
Yeah.
So a maiden race is a lot different than an allowance race where horses that haven't won 2 races that year. So in one race you have nothing but rookie horses. In another race, you have horses that have probably won 6 figures. So there's different criteria you apply depending on the conditions of the race.
Well, let's leave it there. I think we do a show on horse racing. You'll come back, right? We'll do this again.
I'd love to.
Yeah, we'll talk about horse racing.
Yeah.
All right, folks. That's my friend Alex, going all the way back to kindergarten, redneck hippies, a guy that's an athlete, a musician, a great dad, grandfather raising some grandboys. What do you call those? Grandchildren, grandboys? And
I call them rat boys.
Yeah.
Is what I call them. They're my buddies. They're doing great.
Yeah. And horse track handicappers. So thanks for listening in. This has been a podcast by George. All the best.